Hello everybody, welcome to Talks Tamiya. I am Craig. I am a YouTuber and I've decided to go into podcasting for the first time to see whether there is a audience out there for a RC Tamiya related podcast. So that's what we're going to be doing today. A little bit about me. I've been YouTubing for the last 4 years now, and my content has very much been focused around building RC models and playing around with them in a back garden. I was a keen RC enthusiast back when I was younger, getting one for my birthday one year. I got a Kyosho Raider back in 1990, somewhere around there, and it just kicked off a couple of summers really of RC related fun, breaking our RCs, putting them back together again, and genuinely having a good time. And then it got to around 93, 94, and we fell out of the hobby, unfortunately, as most people do. You find something else. For us, children of the 80s and early 90s, unfortunately, the video games kind of took a greater seat, which has been my hobby for probably around the same sort of time, really, ever since I was old enough to hold a controller. But lockdown, and I'm sure for many of us we're the same, lockdown gave us an opportunity to rediscover some of those hobbies that perhaps we'd left behind earlier in our life. And for me, RC, and certainly Tamiya RC, was where it all started again. And I got myself a DT03 kit during lockdown, built the buggy, learnt about how buggies went together and understood more about how the hobby had changed over the many years that I've been out of it. And then I spent some time reworking my Kyosho Raider and getting that working again, which was a success for the most part, except for the fact the MSC didn't really like my driving out in my back garden, unfortunately. And then I set about building a TT02B and other models. And now there's somewhere in the region of 20 odd models in my collection, and it expands all the time. And I've moved some on. I've got some new ones. I will share those stories with you over however long we end up podcasting for. But what I thought we would do is have a monthly podcast where we talk about what's happening in the world of Tamiya, maybe pick up some of the other news stories that are going on out there in and around the hobby, and also talk a little bit about what's going on the channel. And I also thought from time to time it'd be great if I could get some other YouTubers or other people that are interested in talking on a podcast on to talk a little bit more about the hobby. So where shall we start today? I thought we would start a little bit by talking about Tamiya's new releases. And the first one that springs to mind right at the back end of December was the Hornet Evo. And the Hornet Evo, for those of you that might not know, is a reimagined version of the 1980s classic, the Tamiya Hornet. And what Tamiya have done is they've actually done quite a lot of re-engineering to the model. They've changed the way that the front shocks are all mounted up, different shocks as well. They've changed some of the geometry of the front wheels. They've taken pretty much all of the front end to the start of the gearbox and kept that as it was. And then they've bolted a gearbox from the DT chassis to that back end. And it sounds really simple, but it's more than that. They've got adjustable arms on it. It's got a slightly wider stance. The gearbox from the DT02/03 is pretty much bulletproof, so it can take more modern power. And I think for the most part, a lot of people have really been enjoying it. I should also mention it's got bearings throughout as well, which, as those of you will know, for a Tamiya kit is pretty rare. They tend to save that for the higher end buggies and models. From what I've seen, I don't have a Hornet Evo myself. From what I've seen, it looks like it drives loads better than the Hornet, and you would expect that for a buggy that's got a more modern gearbox and different shocks, oil-filled shocks and different positions and adjustable arms. You'd expect it to drive an awful lot better. But I think it kind of misses that classic Hornet sound when it's running. And for those of you that have run a Hornet or a Grasshopper, or even to some extent the lunchbox, the CW01, you get that chatter from the rear end and The Hornet Evo, from what I've heard, misses a lot of that iconicness of those models, but it does look like it jumps a lot better. It looks like it drives a lot better. I can certainly see why people are excited about it. In terms of price, here in the UK, the list price on it was £189, and in fact the list price might have been more than that. I've seen it at retail most places for £189, and that seems like an awful lot of money for a nostalgic RC that is essentially a front end of a Hornet that can be picked up for about £89-90, and a DTO 2 or 3 rear end which can be picked up for about £80 or £90. So it seems like a lot of money, and I know that everyone will wait in and go, yeah, but Tamiya's redesigned it and it's got bearings, and yeah, that is all true, but I do think the price point has got a huge amount of nostalgia baked into it. Loads of people will have rushed out, loads of people will have bought that model and enjoyed it for what it is, but I think that if I'm honest, the price could have been maybe 150 might have been the sweet spot. And I've seen a couple of people out there who have been selling it for sort of 170, 165, and maybe that's the compromise. But what I would say is it does look pretty cool, and I don't think many of us would be against Tamiya doing more of these Evo models at some point, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So right at the start of the year, we saw the re-release again of the Super Stute. That was the model from 2018. The original, when it first came out, was state-of-the-art Tamiya engineering. It was, up there with, I suppose, the Avanti and the Egress. The Astute and the Super Astute were sort of those over-engineered. The Dynastorm came after that. Those over-engineered, super competitive race buggies, or designed to be super competitive. And the Super Astute was an evolution of the Astute. There were things that didn't quite work out for Tamiya with the Astute, and they put some of them right with the Super Astute. So the diff in the Astute was the same one that was in the Madcap, and it was a ball diff. I think it was one of Tamiya's first ball diffs. And I've rebuilt one of those on the Madcap, and it is an absolute nightmare. It warps. The plates inside warp, and they all get misshapen. So, it just doesn't last very long. And they are very, very difficult to repair and replace these days, unless you can find someone who's recast the diff casings, which you can find someone who's done some of that sort of stuff on eBay, but it's getting more and more tricky to keep those models going. So the Super Astute used a redesigned differential that used planetary gears similar to the design that was in the Avanti and the Egress. So that was pretty cool that they found a solution to the diff. They also had the Tamiya traction control system, which essentially was a slipper clutch mechanism onto the gearbox to help protect the diff, which again seemed to work really, really well. The Super Astute came with some bearings, but not enough bearings to completely fill out all the different areas that we're using bushings. So if you're going to build a Super Astute, you need 34 different bearings in total. And the reason there's so many is they're used to mount the front and rear arms to the chassis as well. There's bearings in all of those, or there's bushings in all of those. And you can replace those out with bearings. Lots of people prefer the design of the original Astute and the aesthetics of that car. I disagree. I think the Super Astute looks fantastic, and I think it is certainly a 90s icon for me. I find the traditional Astute a little bit boring, but that's because I remember flicking through the Tamiya catalogue back in the early 90s and I dreamed of the Super Astute. I didn't dream for the Astute because that Super Astute had all the extra Tamiya marketing behind it as to why it was improved and why it was so much better. That was the model I wanted. So being able to see that and get that again in 2025 is awesome. And I've been waiting and hoping that Tamiya would bring that again after releasing it in 2018, because that was, I got back into the hobby just as that model was phasing out the hobby stores. So it's taken 7 years and it's rolled back around again. So I'm pretty cool with that. And I'm really pleased that I've been able to get one of those on the channel. And I will be hopefully building that at some point in the coming well, I say months, but it's probably more likely going to be years. I've been waiting for that thing for 30 years, so waiting another couple of months to build it, I was no skin off my nose. Right, the other thing that Tamiya will be releasing in the coming weeks is the TB05R, which is a shaft-driven four-wheel drive road chassis. I don't know a great deal about this one. You can change the layout of the chassis to put the motor in the front or in the rear, which, given the weight distribution, affects handling quite a bit. I'd imagine that's quite unique and quite interesting to play around with. It's ball raced, universal drive shafts, TRF dampers. It looks to me like a complete package. And if you're into your road cars, it looks like a really interesting chassis, and I'm sure it's pretty competitive when you're racing that around against different people. And many people, sort of from reading different forums and doing different reviews of it, overall, the general consensus seems that people are very happy with it, and it seems to do exactly what people want it to do. I'm not big on my road cars. I'd like to get more into it, but I find that the problem is just finding somewhere flat and even to run them in the UK. And I'd imagine a lot of these things end up being driven on carpets indoors, just because there's nowhere really to run them in the UK. Okay, next topic. That covers all of the new releases that we'll see, hopefully, as we go through January in terms of Tamiya radio control cars. So the next question that I had to talk to you guys about was the TD platform. And there's a lot of rumours at the moment that has been discontinued by Tamiya, and we're no longer going to see that the Super Astute 2022 or the Astute 2022 or whatever it's called, and the Avanti 2021 model, we're not going to see those in the stores again, which I think it's a shame, really. I'll come on to why I think it's a shame in a minute. We've seen them heavily discounted, certainly in the UK, and I think they were in the US as well. They've been heavily discounted in the run-up to Christmas. So I can't remember the exact numbers, but the Astute was down to getting close to £199. Sorry, the Avanti was close to £199, the TD4, and the TD2 was £160, I think, something like that. Which, if you look at what you get in those buggies, is a heck of a deal. And I'm really, really pleased with my TD2, and I wish I picked another one up for £160. And I do have a TD4 that I did pay more than the £199 that it got to for, but I am also really looking forward to building that model. But now many sites are selling out of them, and they're now listing them as being discontinued. We're not going to see that model again, which is a shame, really, because I think Tamiya had started to try and do something new. They had designed this new buggy, and if you look back during the timeline, I mean, the last buggies we got were back in 2009, 2010. Tamiya have been really quiet on the production of buggy chassis since then, and this was them trying to do something different and do something new. And I think we've got to appreciate that Tamiya are still trying to evolve their buggy chassis and trying to give us modelers something new to do. But it just didn't land, and I think part of the problem was that they used the Astute and the Avanti names. I think a lot of people didn't like the styling on the chassis, not the chassis necessarily, but the body shells. People didn't like the styling on it. Some people complained. I complained that they're really difficult to work on. So when I had a problem with the diff nut, which I'll come on to in a minute, on the TD2, I had to spatchcock the whole rear end. You've got to take the whole thing apart, take all the arms out. You have to open the whole back out to get at the diff, and then you have to put it all back together again. The maintenance on that thing, it probably took me a good hour to get the diff out, to tighten it up and put it all back in again, which is not great if you're looking to try and race these things. I thought the TD2 was a really nice build. I enjoyed building it. I didn't have, other than that diff not being tight enough, I didn't really have any problems with the build. And the reason that I didn't tighten the diff properly was all down to the fact that they give you a plastic diff nut. And there'd been so many people over-tightening it and stripping the thread on the plastic diff nut. I was so worried about doing that, I didn't end up tightening it enough. And it came loose on the first drive. Tamiya really should have put the hop-up part, which is a alloy diff nut, should have been in the kit from day one. They made a mistake there, and if they'd have included that in there early on, there wouldn't have been quite as much negative press about it. Yes, people didn't like the way it looked, but a lot of people were complaining about that diff nut and not being tight enough right at the start when it first came out. Do I think Tamiya will release another body type on that chassis? Will they do something different again? I hope so. It's nice to see Tamiya breaking the mold and doing something different and giving us a different buggy type. And they've done it with the BB01, the BBX buggy. And they've done it recently with some other chassis. We've got the MB01, we've got the GR02, we've got the BT01. Tamiya are trying to give us some new stuff, and that's great, but they're not hitting home with it. And it does worry me that means that we're not going to see future new releases, because they'll go back to playing it safe with rehashes of DTO2s and DTO3s and so on and so forth, and TTO2s. And I don't want that. I want Tamiya to be evolving their lineup and giving us some new stuff to play with. So maybe they'll come back to it in 18 months' time, a year's time, 2 years' time, and they'll say, hey, look, here's the TD2 or the TD4 with a different body shell. We're going to give you something different. Or maybe they'll put some big wheels on it and turn it into a bit of a hybrid monster truck for us to play around with, and just do a reimagined Mad Bull or something like that with the chassis. That would be nice to see. You can still get them if you're looking around the UK. There are still TD4s out there, but they're now back up to sort of full price. There are a couple of TD2s knocking around at that 160 mark if you're looking for them, if you can find them. Hop-ups seem to still be widely available, which is great, and you can still get spare parts from people like Tony's Tamiya Parts, or if you scour around eBay, you can find some spares, which is all positive stuff. I just hope Tamiya don't dry up the spares production for those people who are running them and are driving them or racing them, because that will just be the end of it then. So we'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think that the TD platform will come back in another way? Do you think Tamiya were right to discontinue it? Let me know. Okay, we're on now to new releases. What is coming in the next couple of months from Tamiya? Well, looks like it's confirmed that the Bigwig is going to have another release. That, I think, was originally reread back in 2018. So again, like the Super Stute, it's great to see that chassis is coming back around. I think it's a bit of a Marmite buggy, to be honest. I don't like it personally, but the Bigwig does have a huge amount of fans out there, and I'm sure there are people that are going to be really, really super happy that they can now get another Bigwig that they can build new out the box and not necessarily worry about running it outside and breaking it up when their original can sit on a shelf somewhere and be a shelf queen. So that's good that they've re-released, or they're planning to re-release the Bigwig. We've seen that the Honda Turbo looks like it's getting a re-release. I've not seen that officially, I don't think, from Tamiya, but there are a couple of websites that have got pre-orders up for the Honda Turbo. Now that will be a big seller. The question for that is, how expensive is it going to be? Are Tamiya going to put it out at a reasonable price? I mean, if you go on the Manta Ray in the UK, it was $149.99. Good price. The Super Stute was $240, $250. Seemed like a fair price. It seems that when they do the re-re's, they are considerate about what price they're putting these back out into the market at. I'd be really disappointed if Tamiya stick the Honda Turbo up at £250, because they know that people are going to spend that sort of money if they want one of those. I think when I saw some of the prices that they were selling at before they discontinued it last time, they were knocking out about £160 in the UK. So it will be really disappointing if that is one of the models where we're seen to be taken advantage of in terms of price. But I know a lot of people are really keen on the Honda Turbo. I like the look of them, and if I had the opportunity to get one at a reasonable price, I probably would get one, just to have a different model to build on my channel. And I quite like that model as a display piece. I'd like to have that sat on a shelf somewhere. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. The other model that I've picked up and noted when I was sort of scouring around various different YouTube channels, is it looked to me like in Japan there's rumours of a old Mark II MR2 coming on the BT01 chassis. Now, I don't know much about the BT01 other than lots of people complained that it wasn't a particularly easy chassis to drive. There was a lot of slop in the drivetrain and the wheels and the steering mechanism, and it just wasn't fun, and people were not enjoying it. They didn't enjoy the build, and they did enjoy the fact that it's one of these multi-flexible platforms that can be changed to front and rear and whatnot. And I don't think it's gone down particularly well. However, putting out some different body shells on that platform to get more of those cars out there. And I think if Tamiya could find a way of including some solutions to some of the things that people are complaining about, now whether that's some shims or whether they look at the way some of the plastics are used and just re-engineer it slightly, I do think that platform, the fact that you could interchange it between front and rear wheel drive, could be quite popular when it comes to some of the more authentic body shells that they could put out there. I don't know about you guys, but if I'm building a particular model car, ideally I like it when the chassis is running a front or rear wheel drive as the original model would have done, or the original vehicle would have done. I hate it when you end up with a rear wheel drive car on a four wheel drive platform. There's something in me that tells me that's not right, and then I get really frustrated that I've replicated that incorrectly. But hey, sometimes you have to do that when you're modelling, right? You have to take a creative license and say, well, this body shell looks great on this platform, so I'm going to use it. So MR2 Classic or MR2 Mark II on the BT01. Rumours could only be a Japan-only model. Maybe we'll see it in the US and Europe. Who knows? But it does sound pretty cool. And it's nice to see that Tamiya are confident that they're still going to keep putting models out on the BT01. So we've got to the end of 24. This is the first show of 2025. And I thought I would go through some of what I dream about for 2025. What are the Tamiya models, the Tamiya RC models, that I would like to see come back in 25 that would get me excited, get me getting my wallet out and thinking, okay, brilliant, I'm going to add some boxes to the collection this year. So I'm starting off with my personal number one, it's a rerun of the Dynastorm. I don't think that rerun will ever be the same as the one that they did back in 2000 and I want to say 2001, it could have been 2002 or 2003 when they did the first re of the Dynastorm. I think it would end up being different today. They would use some different parts. They might put some different shocks on it. They'll definitely have to have a different motor on it because they don't do that pink motor anymore. So it would be different. It'd be reimagined. But I would love to see that buggy come back into existence in some way, shape or form, because it's probably next to the Super Stute, the one that I looked at in the catalogues and went, oh, I really want to have that buggy. And it's just not available. Well, it is. If you want to pay the second-hand prices of those things on YouTube, you can get one. And I know people who have rebuilt them and refurbished them. But having done that with a Madcap and gone down that money pit, I'm not sure I want to build something like that to run in my back garden on my little tiny track. And for those of you that watch the channel, I've got this Orchard Raceway, which is a real tight, quick circuit. Your cars are doing sort of 6-second laps around it, but it's really tight and there's loads of trees and tree roots. And if I put together a reconditioned Dynastorm and I smash it up in 30 seconds in the back garden, I'm going to be pretty annoyed with myself. And I don't take any of my models too seriously, but I think something that you've pumped that much money into does carry a certain weight when you're limited into what else that's allowed you to buy. So I'd love for it to see a re so I would feel probably less precious about smashing it up if that were to happen out on the track. So yeah, Dynastorm, that'd be great. I would also like to see the return of a TRF buggy in some way, shape or form. I'd love for Tamiya to put a bit of love back into their buggies and give us something that is a bit more race ready. I'm not saying I want them to make another fully race pedigree buggy because I don't think they could compete with the Team Associated and the Schumachers, and I don't think they could now. I think the market has really moved on there to really super high spec racing buggies and carpet buggies that are very, very different. And I don't think Tamiya's there anymore. They were at one point, they're not now. But it'd be really cool if they could keep that ideal of the TRF going and just give us, I mean, crikey, I think I'd be happy with a TRF 2.0 something coming back out again, or one of the 5.0 something buggies coming back again, and just give us a taste of it, please, Tamiya. Let's see it again. I think we're going to see some more Evo models. People have said to me, I mean, the Grasshopper seems to be a logical step for them. They've done the Hornet, do a Grasshopper Evo, that'd be cool. I mean, that should just be the Hornet Evo with a Grasshopper body on. But let's allow Tamiya to come up with how they do that. I think there's a lot of people who have said it'd be really cool to see a lunchbox, an Evo lunchbox in some capacity. Now that would be really interesting. But hey, what about some of the other models? What about a Hornet Evo? Or what about a Hotshot Evo? That's what I meant to say. They've done a Hornet Evo. What about a Hotshot Evo? Or what about a Thunder Dragon Evo? I mean, how far do they go with these things? I don't know. I think it's a great concept. I think there is the danger that they could go too far and dilute what is an Evo, and then they sort of take away from the meaning of what they've done with the Hornet. But I think a Lunchbox Evo could be pretty cool. Are we going to see more models on the BT01, MB01 chassis? Obviously, there's that rumour. We've got the MR2, so that'd be cool. But I, for one, think the MB01 is a perfect platform to put a mini body shell back out. And I think if Tamiya went back to whoever's got, I mean, it must be BMW that's got the mini rights now. Go back to BMW, get the rights for that classic Mini Cooper body shell, and put that back out into the Tamiya fan base. I think people would lap that up. I think it would sell like hotcakes. I would buy an MB01 instantly if it came with a Mini Cooper body shell. Just for the body shell, if nothing else. But I think it would just look really cool. Yes, the MB01's got a lot of problems too. I do have one of those to build at some point because I wanted to try and put a little rally flare into that chassis. So we'll see how that goes. But I think if they did a mini, I think it would sell well. I put down in the show notes about a TTO3. I'd also put a DTO4 alongside that as well. I'm probably more confident of the DTO4 being a possible thing than I am of a TTO3. And that's because I think the BTO1 has become the TTO3, essentially. Tamiya have decided they're not going to do another TT chassis. And they've just said, we're going to do this BTO1 that we're going to be able to do front wheel drive, and we'll just keep pumping out the TTO2. Because it's well established, people buy it, people get lots of hop-ups for them, they're interchangeable, there's loads of spares, it's cheap to build, it's cheap to maintain. I think we're kind of stuck with it, really. But I would like to see it evolve into something new. And the same with the buggy platform. I really like the DT03. It always goes well whenever I do my time trial series. That is always consistently a buggy that does way better than I expected it to. And not just a little bit better, way better than I expected it to. And I think there's just something about the way that's set up. It just seems to work. And the DTO2 is very good as well. So it would be nice to see Tamiya evolve on that chassis and give us something slightly new. But I don't know if they're going to. You know, it seems that there's not a lot of popularity in buggies now. And I think we're kind of in that lull where the focus is going back towards the road cars and the rally cars rather than being the buggies, which is a shame. But we saw that happen in the 2000s where Tamiya just seemed to ditch the buggy for a long period. The buggies have come back with a lot of popularity for the re-res, and there has been some popularity around that DT02, DT03 platform. It would just be nice to see them take that evolution of that a step forward. Will we see something else on the GF02 chassis? The squash van was reasonably popular, I think. It'd be nice to see something else come on that same platform. That one required an awful lot of bearings, but from what I've heard, people think it's really good and handles well, so it'd be fun if Tamiya did something cool with that. Will we see something new? Will Tamiya go out and give us another new chassis? or will they just play it safe and keep going with the stuff that they've already done? I think the BBX surprised a lot of people. That chassis, there's one that could have something new on it again. It would be nice to see them using that for something else. Will they give us something completely new that none of us know about? Or will they just keep pushing out things that they've done before? Another release that I would like to see come back, I mentioned the TRF earlier. I'd love to see a rerun of the DB01, the Durga or the Boldra, and the DN01, the Zahak. I've got a DB01 and it was a really fun build and it's a really nice buggy. I would love for Tamiya just to give us those buggies in the market again today. I think there's a lot of people who want those, who are worried about picking them up because there's no spares or there's no hop-ups, and with the interest that's been there for the RC10 again from Team Associated and the Dirt Cross and the Dirt Master from Kyosho, it just shows that there's a little bit of a market there for some vintage RCs, and maybe Tamiya could dust off that platform, stick some different body shells on and put them back out into the market. They're really good chassis. So if you give them a decent body shell, I think people would go out and buy them, and especially if they were at a good price. The two that I haven't mentioned, I think are probably, from what I see in forums and Facebook and reading through the YouTube comments that I get and other people's channels, there's two re-releases that people really would love to see Tamiya put out. And one is easy. It's the 959. And I didn't really know a great deal about that 959 chassis. I remember seeing it back in the day. I saw it in the books and I was interested in it because it was a rally chassis, a rally car, but I didn't really know much about it. And since having gotten into the rally chassis a lot more in the recent years, I've revisited the 959, and I think I understand why people like it so much. At the time, it was revolutionary in terms of the chassis design, and it really gave people a competent off-road rally chassis. So I can kind of see why people are excited about it. The difficulty for Tamiya is like that Porsche that they put out, was it the 956, where they had to redesign the decals to get the cigarette branding off. That seems to have gone down reasonably well, and I hope that was Tamiya sort of putting a toe in the water to say, if we do this on the 959, will people still buy it? And I think they will. The question really is, what do they do with that chassis? Do they have they got the molds? Can they redesign it in a way that will work for modern power? I just don't know enough about that chassis to be able to say whether it will or it won't. If you know more about it, please leave some comments below. Let me know what you think. Will the 959 come back? The other one that people really want to see again is the Falcon. And I do have a Falcon to restore. I'm restoring it not with brand new parts because they're very difficult to get hold of, but 3D printed parts, which Paul Coughlin, who is one of the RC guys on YouTube, he contacted me and sent me a Falcon to rebuild, restore, and put out on the track. And I didn't know a lot about the Falcon back in the day, but having researched it, I can see why it's been such a popular car for a lot of people. I think for a lot of people, it would have probably been their first RC because it was aimed at the entry level. But crikey, what a great RC that was as a first RC. When that came out, it was sort of the next evolution of two-wheel drive after people had been stuck with Hornets and Grasshoppers for years. And then all of a sudden, the entry-level Tamiya is now this wonderful two-wheel drive RC with 4 oil-filled shocks around it, and a great drivetrain. It looks really cool and it's very different, and it's called a Falcon. The only problem with it is it just wasn't very robust. So it was probably fine if you were just bashing it around on the lawn, but once you put it on a track, it just broke to pieces. I think a lot of people had a lot of problem maintaining that buggy back in the day, and the proof will be in the pudding when I get it out on the Orchard Raceway. It looks great, and I hope it's going to drive reasonably well. And from videos that I've seen of Falcons running, they usually put pretty good lap times in, so I'm feeling quite positive about seeing that one out on the track. But it would make me feel more comfortable running it if I knew Tamiya were going to re-release it. So, what do you think? What do you think Tamiya is going to do in 2025? 2026 looks like it's also a big year for Tamiya RC, so it might be that some of these on the wish list roll over into 26. Who knows? Well, it's kind of time. I hope you've all enjoyed that. 35 minutes on a solo podcast. For the first time I've ever done one, I'm pretty pleased with how this has turned out. I want this to evolve. So if you've got any ideas, if you like the format, please let me know. If you've got ideas of things you'd like to hear me talking about, let me know. A whole year's worth of content's an awful lot of stuff to fill, and I'm sure Tamiya will give us some lovely news stories along the way. But it'd be really nice to get some feedback from the audience as to what sort of stuff you'd like to hear me talking about. And let's see if we can keep this up for the next 12 months so we do a full year of podcasting. I'm Craig. This is Talks Tamiya. And if you wouldn't mind, please go and check out my YouTube channel, the OAG RC. There'll be a link somewhere in this podcast to that channel. And I would appreciate you leaving any comments for me and let me know how things are going. Till then, enjoy yourself. Take care. Bye for now.